Now, if you go to the next level and you're going, okay, I want to do what Shannon and Carson are doing as an example.
Sure.
And I've got a site, they like to call it warts, right? There's a bit of warts on it, right? There's a bit of koala habitat. We've got a bit of a ravine going through it. We've got some flooding issues, but we think we can, everyone's scared of it, but we think we could get 30 lots on here. And we want to take it all the way through to construction. We want to build the roads. We want to build the infrastructure, which is plumbing and electricity and the likes. And then we want to just sell the blocks of land. What would that process look like?
A whole team of consultants.
And when do you engage? What's the timeline? When do you actually engage the landscape architect versus the town planner versus the surveyor? These types of as a project manager.
Yeah. I mean, the answer to that question will depend on the case-by-case scenario, and depending on how much information is already available. So in some instances, you might already have survey plans already there. And so that information you already have at hand might allow you to delay the engagement of more survey work. But let's just assume in this scenario, you have basically nothing.
We could work on a real event that we're working on now, if you like. We haven't launched yet. We've already engaged how many different consultants.
Yeah, that's right. So
let's do that as an example, right? Because I want people to start understanding a little bit of what's involved from a consultant perspective without getting overwhelmed.
Sure.
Because I remember when I first got into development, and then I started understanding, when we did our first mid-rise and the amount of consultants that you had to engage, I was dumbfounded. Now it's no problem, but at the beginning.
Yeah. So I think the example that Shannon was referring to, in that case, we were dealing with a fairly large piece of land with several different constraints. And so bringing a town planner in at the earliest possible time was pretty critical. But also, because there are environmental constraints, we needed an ecologist to come in and do a survey of the ecological values of that land.
And what does an ecologist do?
An ecologist looks at effectively the natural environment.
Yeah.
So, fauna and flora. So, vegetation and animals. Yep. Waterways, those types of things. What are the values, the ecological and environmental values that are present on this land? How do we navigate the relevant environmental controls or restrictions or rules that relate to development where you have perhaps some environmental values on land that are protected?
Yeah.
So understanding those constraints is really important.
So town planner, you then got the ecologist on board.
Yep. Engineering and civil infrastructure expertise is also critical to understanding the infrastructure capacity. So when I talk about infrastructure capacity, what I mean by that is when we talk about doing residential development, we need to understand what type of infrastructure is essential for delivering that development outcome. So infrastructure is a broad term that can include things like water and sewer, stormwater, roads, and also parks. Typically, a civil engineer will deal with those first four, water, sewer, stormwater, and roads. And then you might have a planner that looks at the parks infrastructure as well. So a civil engineer is really vital to doing some early investigations to see what is the infrastructure capable of sustaining in terms of extra development. So when you do a residential development, you need to connect it to the water infrastructure, the city or the town water. Is there enough capacity in that infrastructure to service that development?
And how far away it is from the actual development site
exactly,
as well. Right?
Because that can be a massive cost and risk for a development. If you find out that in order to deliver the development you're proposing, you need to improve or expand on the existing infrastructure, that could kill the viability of a project straight away. So understanding those limitations is really key. So we've got now a planner, an ecologist, a civil engineer.
Yep.
But then you need to also look at, I guess, the other constraints on the land. So one of the big ticket items in our part of the world is bushfire constraints and flooding, right? So making sure that if your site is prone to flooding or bushfire risks, that you've got an expert that can look into those matters and give you some advice about how your development can respond to those constraints. Quite often, when it comes to bushfire, the issues there are interconnected with matters of ecology. More trees often means more bushfire risk. Quite often there are rules around what trees you can clear, and also there are rules around how close you can build to trees because of the bushfire risk. So having that expert opinion from both an ecologist who tells you what trees you need to protect, but also a bushfire expert that tells you what trees you might need to remove is pretty critical to understanding whether your development has any risks associated with it.
And this is when you're looking at the overlays, and if there is bushfire risk there, that's when, and if it's big enough, that's when you would say, okay, this is out of the ecologist pay grade. You now got to get a bushfire expert, as an example, to be brought in on as another consultant.